Imagine, if you will, a whole new dimension. A brave new world that you can only access through the medium of a $300 electric blindfold. Escape a material world that teeters on ecological collapse and into a make-believe one where Half-Life 3 came out 2 years ago. This virtual world is so immersive that you might not notice when your girlfriend moves out and takes half the furniture with her. But don't worry, because the only guys in the metaverse who don't have anime cat girlfriends are the ones pretending to be them. But all is not well in this digital paradise. It's being conquered by an artificial intelligence known as the Zuckerborg. The Zuckerborg might have convinced you that he birthed the metaverse from his own mind folds, but its first bricks were laid decades ago. And if we're going to understand what the metaverse actually is, then we're going to have to understand the dreams and ideals of its reality and deodorant-dodging pioneers. The earliest development in virtual reality actually takes us all the way back to London in the year of Queen Victoria's coronation. In 1838, if you wanted to escape the reality in front of your face, you could either visit an opium den or try out one of Charles Wheatstone's stereoscopes. Charlie figured out that showing each eye 2 separate images taken from slightly different angles gave the illusion of depth. And Victorians first harnessed this eye-tricking tech to take little head holidays to famous landmarks. And like nearly all modern VR users, the next thing they wanted to see was some 3D double Ds. Stereoscopic pornography was extremely popular, and this would start a trend that we'll see with pretty much every subsequent virtual reality. Once someone figured out how to stitch still images together and trick people into thinking they were going to get hit by a train, the stereoscope was out and cinema was in. For the next 60 years, a flat screen in a dark room was immersive enough for these 20th century simpletons, so there was no need to strap anything to your head. That was until 1962, when one man was brave enough to ask the question, what if you could smell movies too? Morton Heilig was the inventor of the Sensorama machine. And while its patent diagram might make you think it was designed to cook your head like a succulent microwavable meal, it was actually an immersive cinema experience. In the Sensorama, your head could see, feel, and smell 5 whole films, all farted straight from Morton's own mind box.
I generally have about 2 smells for each film. But you can have more. I have 10 smells, but you can have 50 smells.
And here, Morton is still leagues ahead of modern VR, where the only thing I can smell is my own sweaty pits after a vigorous Beat Saber session. These, though, were just the first evolutionary steps in VR. The hunched-over, head-mounted monkeys who had to walk before we could run straight into our living room wall. But in the same year that man walked on the moon, a computer scientist was taking the first giant leap into virtual reality. Ivan created a headset attached to a ceiling-mounted system called the Sword of Damocles, which allowed the user to see a virtual environment from different angles without snapping their neck in half. While Ivan could be considered the daddy of VR as we know it, his metaverse was nothing more than a single wire-framed room, which he modestly showed off in this lecture from 1996.
And I said earlier that we put off the database problem for a while. I'll show you the most complicated image we ever saw through this device.
As virtual reality became a reality, its pioneers had to cook up real-world reasons for the government to spend millions on their made-up fantasy worlds. By 1985, NASA had given up on sending people to the moon, but they still had enough cash to spaff on VR motorcycle helmets. NASA believed these headsets would be used to control robotic vehicles, and that VR itself would be a sort of virtual workstation and three-dimensional data space. While NASA was limited by the technology of its era, virtual reality was being fully explored in 1980s fiction. In 1984, William Gibson published Neuromancer, the first of 3 novels set in the Sprawl, a science fiction world where drug-addled, sex-mad console cowboys entered a cyberspace matrix to take on different physical forms. An anime from 1985 called Megazone 23 also beat The Matrix to the punch with its whole "actually you're living in a computer simulation" twist, complete with black-suited agents, computer-simulated women, and some familiar dialogue.
You're actually telling me that the world and everything in it is a lie, made up by some computer somewhere?
At best, 5 centuries is the most we can prove have passed.
Back in the real world, though, a video game developer and white dude with dreads named Jaron Lanier was about to push us hard into the Matrix. After making a ton of cash from developing games like Moondust for the Commodore 64, Jaron started VPL, Virtual Programming Languages, a company that jump-started the first age of consumer-focused virtual reality, with products like the Data Glove and the iPhone. That's I like I. That wasn't clear. Finally allowing users to finger the blocky inhabitants of the same virtual dimension where those 90s bowling alley animations must have come from. If you wanted to slip on a Data Glove though, it would have cost you about $8,000, and that doesn't include the $200,000 computer you'd have needed to run a simulation on an iPhone. Jaron was, and remains, a dreamer who had deep insights about where the future was going. And he was as stubbornly committed to the future of virtual reality as he is to his yee-ass haircut.
Because in the future, there'll be many cases where people are inside a virtual world and they want to design something in that virtual world. So the question is, how will they do it? And sometimes they might sculpt, sometimes they might build things out of pieces and put them together. But I think for a lot of things, they'll be using things that are like musical instruments that you play, because musical instruments are the most powerful user interface that's ever been created for anything so far.
Jaron's ambition for VR predicted much of what actually did come to pass, but they also went far beyond. As soon as VPL's computers were powerful enough, they created full-body tracking suits to show the movements of avatars and allowing VPL to live up to their acronym. Modern VR users are still shackled to these ankle bracelet things to track full-body movement, which is fitting because the only people who really use them are the inhabitants of VR chat, most of whom should probably be under house arrest. But naturally, virtual reality's most obvious application is as a tool to act out our most violent fantasies without consequence. I'm talking, of course, of video games. As the World Wide Web went worldwide in the 1990s, the idea of a totally computer-simulated world seemed a lot less far-fetched, even if some laughed off the internet itself as a gimmick.
It is the big new thing.
Yeah, but you know, it's easy to criticize something you don't fully understand, which is my position here.
Go ahead.
But I can remember a couple of months ago, there was like a big breakthrough announcement that on the internet or on some computer deal, they were going to broadcast a baseball game. You could listen to a baseball game on your computer. And I just thought to myself, does radio ring a bell?
Consumers were finally bi-curious, so companies quickly cobbled together some cheap, plastic headsets to strap to the masses. Although not all of them made it to market, as was the case with Sega's VR glasses, which got aborted faster than a premature prom night accident.
Oh! Can't see a thing, can you? That's it right there. It's a real device.
That same year, Dr. Jonathan Waldern had slightly more success with his multiplayer arcade system, Virtuality, a system where you could shoot each other on an arena of floating chessboards or beat each other off in a simulated boxing match. The company just about managed to stay in business throughout most of the 1990s, fueled by novelty, hype, and a still thriving arcade scene. But if you wanted to use a VR system that didn't need to be wiped down between each user, your only option was to get your hands on a Nintendo Virtual Boy. There was about 5 left in the country. I found one. I should probably start by saying that the Virtual Boy wasn't really virtual reality. It was a headset that was barely more sophisticated than Charlie Wheatstone's stereoscope. By blasting 2 separate, slightly different red and black images into your eye holes, it created an illusion of depth and a sensation of having your retinas scrubbed with steel wool, which Nintendo seemed to understand when they advertised it as a creature from the 3rd dimension who wanted to give you an aggressive eye exam.
Virtual Boy, a 3D game for a 3D world. Wanna play?
Only 22 games were actually released for the console, and I hear about 2 of them are even remotely playable in the hunchback airport cavity check position that the console forces you to play in. But I'm going to let you in on a secret that you've probably already guessed at. I have always wanted one of these things, because I am a massive Tetris nerd, and it is the only console where you can play the worst version of Tetris ever made.
Tetris.
Playing Virtual Boy 3D Tetris is what I imagine it must be like to die on the operating table while you're having a brain tumor removed. The overwhelming black space is the incoming darkness, while the incomprehensible mishmash of transparent red pieces represents the remnants of your threadbare and declining consciousness. All the while, the ghoulish cartoon face of your next piece mocks your every attempt to escape the hell that you're headed for. The unbearable and increasingly tense 8-bit soundtrack is pumped directly into your ears, making it feel like you're being forced to solve a Rubik's Cube at gunpoint while simultaneously standing in a German techno club while colorblind. In summation, I fucking loved it. Meanwhile, the reality-dodging dweebs of the VR industry desperately sought novel ways to secure more funding for the future they were certain was just around a poorly rendered corner.
Amazing, isn't it?
One successful application was in training simulations to replace learning on the job where mistakes can be dangerous or prohibitively expensive, like in manufacturing or in surgery where you can remove someone's spine without consequence. Other uses, though, failed to take off, like VR immersion therapy, which was designed to help users get over their fear of flying. 3D virtual modelling effectively replaced physical modelling in many design-led industries, though there were still relatively few occasions where viewing it through a headset was better than looking at it through a really big screen. But if you're a kid with a data glove, then every problem looks like it can be solved with a bit of digital groping. The VR community genuinely believed that they could see into the future, and I think even their wildest, wrongest predictions are quite illuminating.
That when we put this thing on, we have bookshelves in various places, and they are in the places where we put them last week or last month or 2 years ago, and we go and get them in the same way, and some of those are encyclopedias, and some of those are dictionaries, and some are stacks of transparencies that we put there 2 years ago, but we carry that with us, and those are just data files that are inside the small thing that hangs on our belt.
By putting on our own 4-dimensional hindsight goggles, we can see that this guy isn't predicting the future of VR, he's predicting smartphones. We do not talk enough, or we talk too much, depending on your perspective, about how these things are already augmented reality devices that have written the logic of the digital world onto the physical one. What these guys had literally blinded themselves to was that total immersion only really appeals to a small cult of consumers who want to escape reality altogether. Keep that in mind as we enter the next century and the origins of the metaverse. But first, a word from our sponsor. If you want to surf every corner of the metaverse, you're going to need the bodacious protection of Surfshark VPN. Surfshark automatically blocks over 1 million malicious websites, phishing methods, and other threats. It also encrypts your data when you choose to unplug from the metaverse, so you can browse wiki feet on sketchy McDonald's Wi-Fi and no one will be the wiser. With their tubular no-logs policy, Surfshark doesn't keep your data, and it protects you from the mega corporations who do. No part of the web is off limits. Easily unblock streaming platforms across the world, so I can keep up with my Indonesian soap operas. Bagus! Surfshark is even useful during your shopping trip, keeping you from being the victim of location-based price discrimination. One subscription and you can run and install Surfshark on an unlimited number of devices. Relatable! With 24/7 customer support and a 30-day money-back guarantee, don't surf without the shark. Get Surfshark VPN in the link below and use my code OrdinaryThings for 83% off and 3 months extra free. Go on, do it. They're good. I'll use them. So what is the metaverse? Well, it depends who you ask and how much money they expect to make from their definition of it taking off. Meta wants you to believe that it isn't quite here yet, that it's the next evolutionary step in the internet's life cycle. Specifically the bit in the chart where we go from being hunched over our screens to launched over our coffee tables. Parasitic crypto types would have you believe that it's an investment opportunity, the next gold rush for digital goods, land and services that'll all be accessible in the same cyber casino. Others argue that the metaverse won't be a head-mounted escape hatch from reality at all. Rather, it'll be a sort of digital scab that will crust over meat space with the logic of the internet. But I'd argue, in a way, the metaverse is already here. In fact, it's been here for nearly 20 years. Twist! The 2000s was a relatively quiet time when it came to VR tech. The real innovations were saved for those small screens that you can cram in your pocket and smear with sweet baby rays. VR headsets looked set to be buried in the 1990s layer of the landfill, right next to those floral sofas, Furbies, and copies of the O.J. Simpson workout video. And as the 21st century finally stopped buffering, the first metaverses came online. Massively multiplayer online games like Second Life, which was called a metaverse during this Google Tech Talk, which took place months before Facebook had even launched globally.
Like Hunter said, the basic idea with Second Life was, and it wasn't something that was possible until 5 or 6 years ago to even really start working on, it was this radical idea that, well, what if you could create a 3D immersive environment that looked as good as a video game, that was tactile and visceral and exciting and sexy, fun to be in, but had the, of course, very web-like and very compelling property that everything in it was built by you.
The game itself was released in 2003, to the rabid excitement of anyone who wanted to fuck The Sims. Over the course of 10 years, its world grew to accommodate over 1 million active users, and its pre-Bitcoin digital currency fueled an economy based on in-game real estate, clothing, and customizable genitals.
Manpower's Virtual Worlds liaison Dan Darrow and his team have interviewed hundreds of people from over 50 countries in Second Life, sometimes using instant translation devices to communicate. Part of the company's groundbreaking exploration of virtual work includes convening great thinkers in Second Life.
Facebook's plan to launch its own cryptocurrency was killed by regulators before they'd even had a chance to fleece people. But all the way back in 2006, Linden dollars had funded the fortune of the internet's first digital land baron, An Che Chung. The avatar of Aileen Grafe earned millions entirely within Second Life's economy. And she wasn't alone. CNN interviewed these specimens in 2010, who were living off the spoils of their own Second Life real estate empire.
And we made profit. We took that profit and turned it over and bought another sim, and another, and another, and another. We start watching TV, sitting back, playing Second Life, working, watching Raymond. It's sort of like real life, except you're playing an avatar. And you start to live in that avatar, your own person.
It's clear to see that Second Lifers were living the dream, both on and off screen, in a metaverse that pioneered the play-to-earn grift before it even had a name. VR didn't make its comeback until 2012, when a 19-year-old named Palmer Luckey posted his plans to escape from reality on Kickstarter.
My name is Palmer Luckey, and I'm a virtual reality enthusiast and the designer of the Rift.
He received $2.5 million and the attention of anyone who still dreamed of mediating all of their social interactions through a computer screen. Enter one such dreamer, Mark Zuckerberg.
Now we have phones which help us connect with each other, and they're much more human devices, but there's going to be another platform after that. And I think that's going to be virtual reality and augmented reality. And that, I think, is just going to help people, be more creative, experience what other people are feeling much more immersively than we even can through video and things like that today. So I'm really excited about that.
2012 was also when Facebook rolled out mobile targeted ads, a decision that would grow the company's profits exponentially for the next 10 years. It crammed ads into the parts of our lives that had hitherto been ad-free. Now companies could reach you at the dinner table, in the elevator, or on the toilet, and the world was better for it. Or at least Mark thought so. But he dreamed of a further invasion. Total dominion over the world's eyeballs. Starting small, Mark acquired Instagram for a measly $1 billion, and then 2 years later spent over 3 times that amount to acquire Oculus, which tells you everything about what Mark thinks about VR. He is a true believer. Since then, he has been promoting VR as the next step in personal computing. And it's easy to see his lizard brain logic.
I'm gonna have to go with no on that. I am not a lizard, but keep the high quality comments coming in.
Computers started off squirreled away in their own little room. But with the advent of PCs and the smartphone, they've been slowly edging closer and closer to your face. It only makes sense to Mark that humans will eventually end our decade-long flirtation with the screen and just bolt them directly to our skull.
But it is going to bother you because you're human, and I was human. I am human, still.
So his mission for the last decade has been to fast forward this future into the present. Presumably so he'll never have to make eye contact with any of us again. Since 2016, over 35 VR headsets have been released to a mostly uninterested public and to a rabid, red-faced cult of consumers who are keeping the industry alive. Personally, I'd say I'm a sort of fringe member of this cult. I'm enthusiastic, but would ultimately duck out the back exit if they started handing out Kool-Aid. For most of us though, virtual reality's main appeal is a gaming experience that's so immersive that it's absolutely fucking nauseating. I'd say VR is the greatest way yet invented to purge that semi-dormant desire for violence that lives inside all of our primate brains. The only reason to play the buggy as fuck, unfinished but incredibly popular Blade and Sorcery is just how effectively it allows you to satisfy your inner sadist. Stay down. Here we are. Best of all, because the screen is only visible to you, no one else can see the grisly game of whack-a-mole that you're playing with a knife and some dude's torso. If you do need to satisfy your bloodlust though, it's still a lot cheaper to sprinkle broken glass on the beach or poison food at your local homelessness shelter. Most of the best VR games are only playable on an expensive headset that needs to be tethered to an even pricier gaming PC. The Valve Index and every HTC device require you to be tethered to your computer master like the techno gimp that you are, said the man in the leather jacket, which has really limited their sales and prevented them from reaching widespread appeal. To satisfy consumer curiosity, Oculus funded the Samsung Gear, allowing people to test drive the function of virtual reality by slotting their greasy smartphones into a piece of head-mounted plastic. Smartphone VR sold extremely well for about a year, at which point these devices started gathering dust in garages across the world when people realized they were shit. But their strong sales showed Mark and the wider VR community that this technology would never reach widespread adoption until it was cheap, untethered, and not shit. The only headsets that have fulfilled these three criteria are the Oculus Quest and its successor, the Quest 2. Which finally offer users the best of both worlds, as it is untethered, but you can plug it into a PC if you want to experience, like, good VR games. And its base model is pretty cheap, or at least it's cheaper than an iPhone, or this fucking mental Gucci visor I found, which presumably only appeals to the goth centurion who rides horses on weekends. Of course, you look nearly as socially defective wearing one of these in public, but it's obvious why it's dominating the market. It's an amazing piece of tech, totally intuitive and unlike anything on the market at a competing price. Meta don't release their sales figures, but the best independent estimates suggest they have sold over 10 million units this year. And that is largely because people can actually afford them. But Mark and his Meta mates are probably losing billions in selling them. I say probably because, again, Meta are very secretive about their sales figures and overheads. But their Reality Labs division that make the headsets have reported massive and metastasizing losses. Mark is doing this because he knows that widespread VR adoption needs to happen before big developers will sink money into software.
And once we get to a certain size in the community, it's going to become economical for all developers, from the independent folks to, up to the biggest AAA developers that are out there to build content for VR. And once we reach that point, the amount of content is just going to explode, and that's going to push adoption further.
It is hugely unlikely that Meta is making anything close to a profit with these headsets, and it is still light years from mainstream adoption. With Meta's other services showing signs of declining cultural relevance, the metaverse is an enormous gamble for Mark to hedge his entire company on. So Mark is bankrolling the entire consumer VR sector. Without his initial investment in Oculus, the funding of smartphone tech, or the kamikaze Oculus price tag, the whole industry would still just be a techie niche. He has spent the last 5 years trying to sell VR as something more than a head-mounted entertainment system. Like in this bizarre presentation, where he appeared as a Wii Sports avatar in a disaster zone to promote VR as some kind of empathy machine, while still lacking enough human connection to pull off a convincing high five.
It feels like we're in the same place and we're making eye contact, we're talking to each other.
High five.
Yeah, there you go, high five. And so now, I mean, this is we're looking.
More recently, Mark has tried to suck all the fun out of VR by promoting the virtual reality office. To most people, having your workstation beamed into your eyes is a bit like having your brain taken hostage. Why anyone would suffer through the eye and neck strain of having a monitor attached to your face when a screen or two do just as well is beyond me. I don't think anyone's convinced. I've scoured the internet and I have not found one piece of footage where people are at Facebook HQ doing their work with a fucking Oculus strapped to their head.
As we start, planning to go back into the office, I'm not super excited.
Then there's the virtual collaborative office, which I think has only found supporters thanks to pandemic-era brain rot disguised as innovation. In a few years, these scenes will look as batshit as those water gun baptisms do now. Meta's idea of a virtual workspace isn't completely off base though. The VR industry's main source of revenue, other than entertainment, is in enterprise. Not much has changed since the 1990s. It's still mostly used for highly specific scenarios where employees are being trained to work in physical environments. There are also training simulators that teach you how to do the soft-handed tasks of white-collar workers too, like this one from Tailspin, that teaches you how to fire an old man named Barry and emotionally cope as you watch the life drain from his eyes.
Huh, well this sounds official. Go on.
Your attitude has left me no alternative than to terminate your employment.
Although it seems pretty limited. I fired Barry over and over and over again, and while it did finally satisfy my need for virtual sadism, it didn't teach me what to do if he showed up the next day with a bad attitude and an AR-15. While Mark has been busy trying to show the world that VR is more than a neat toy, other companies have been busy building their own mini metaverses. These are game worlds or virtual experiences where you can make friends, explore user-generated content, and hopefully make some cash. So for the last few weeks, I've been traveling the metaverse, trying to discover the future and maybe myself. But as far as I can see, it is mostly occupied by three main groups: children, crypto bros, and the sexually peculiar. No judgment, but that's maybe three groups that you don't want hanging out in the same space. The most cynical metaverse type thing going on right now is Decentraland, a play-to-earn metaverse built on the blockchain. Try saying that word salad sentence to someone who isn't terminally online, and they'll look at you like they just walked in on you beating your saber. Despite this 2017 advertisement, Decentraland is currently still desktop only. With shit-tier visuals, broken environments, and nothing to do other than buy stuff, Decentraland's main appeal is that it's an investment opportunity. Plots of virtual real estate sell for thousands, sometimes millions, mostly to companies who can afford to take a gamble on something so speculative. JP Morgan has even opened its own branch in Decentraland, tucked away somewhere between the crypto casinos and NFT art galleries. During my travels in Decentraland, I saw just as many adverts trying to sell land as people actually building stuff on it. The fact that one of the only things to do in Decentraland is blow wads of crypto at a cyber casino under the judgmental eyes of Pepe Le Frog tells you everything you need to know about this metaverse and its inhabitants. To their credit, Decentraland did try to spice things up with a metaverse rave back in December, but it looked about as much fun as getting a root canal at the Holocaust Museum. A real metaverse needs meaningful interaction, immersion, and a successful simulation of something that users can't get in the real world. Which is why I can no longer avoid talking about VR chat. Depending on the stats you read, VR chat might be the most continuously popular community in virtual reality, even though most users don't actually access this world with a headset. It's a game that has no objective other than socialization. Users inhabit strange characters in user-generated worlds and simulate acts that are an abomination before God. And annoyingly, I must argue that this is genuinely groundbreaking. 15 years ago, Second Life pioneered cybersex when it allowed its users to customize their balls and visit cyber brothels. Some even found love that endured even after they discovered their partner wasn't actually a four-boobed succubus from Mars. But VR Chat's passionate community is now using cutting-edge tech and their degenerate imaginations to take cybersex to brave new heights. Erotic roleplay, or ERC, is a large part of VR Chat's culture. One thing I learned during my travels in this metaverse is that you must stay away from FurHub or Club Mika if you value your sanity and or virtual personal space. In this seventh circle of virtual hell, I found rooms that can be locked for privacy, custom avatars that were extremely unsafe for work, and people using body tracking tech to turn jerking off in front of their computer monitor into a performance art. The VR chat community's commitment to debasing themselves has meant that it is now unmistakably the most immersive social experience in all of virtual reality. Users are so attached to their avatars that it's just as common to see crowds of users standing in front of in-game mirrors as it is to see someone getting straddled by a wolf. There is also a small community who sleep with their headsets on, aiming to wake up immersed in the virtual world. Some have become so immersed in this world that they allege they can feel the touch of other users, a sensation they call phantom touch. But considering one of the other things that VR chat is famous for is kids screaming into the mic and running around these worlds, I'm a little worried about who's getting phantom touched, if you get what I'm saying. While researching all this has made me want to cry in the shower, it shows you just how immersive virtual reality has become for its most devoted users. But its alienating weirdness also demonstrates how far it is from any kind of widespread adoption. Since Mark announced Facebook's desperate meta makeover in December, he has been pushing his own brand metaverse, Horizon Worlds. It's clear that it's been designed to appeal to a broader audience, and it's doing this partly by alienating the kind of users who already love VR and make its worlds come alive. First of all, there are no furries allowed in Mark's metaverse. No, only floating torsos that are supposed to look like you after you've stood on a landmine. Having legs is a frequent cause of complication in other social VR apps. This keeps Mark's world less janky, but it also conveniently keeps it free of genitals. Although this hasn't stopped early testers reporting sexual harassment in Mark's brave new world, forcing Meta to hastily give people the power to set up their own little safe space so no one can fondle the empty space where their balls would be. In Horizon Worlds, there are also no kids allowed, which to be fair, is actually a really good idea. One of the main complaints that a lot of users have with other social VR apps is that they're filled with more screaming, unwanted children than an orphanage for arsonists. But despite Meta's 18+ policy, their world is no exception to this, with microphone-abusing infants somehow managing to bypass Mark's airtight security system. The creator tools in Horizon Worlds are supposed to be inclusive too, and they are. They're impressively easy to use.
Actually, let's go to the beach. Pretty good. Let's add some clouds. Huh, that's all AI generated.
This will allow more people to get creative, but their limitations will result in flat, uninteresting lands with repetitive interactive features. This will kill the service in the long run, as talented world builders will be attracted to similar apps that are harder to use but are more rewarding. Sometimes it looks like Mark has shot himself in the foot with the starting pistol before the race had even begun. To achieve profitability, the metaverse and VR needs to reach widespread adoption. And honestly, I'm not sure I see that ever happening. But it certainly won't happen if Meta continues to alienate the people who already love VR. Although, if their latest Super Bowl ad is anything to go by, Meta have realised the error of their ways and will soon be letting the furries fly their freak flag any day now. I think that Mark Zuckerberg has fallen for the same fallacy that the VR creators of old did. They think that once the tech improves, once the screens get clearer and the headsets get lighter, then everyone will be into VR. Whether it's virtual reality, crypto, or AI, smug, nerdy early adopters love to pat themselves on the back about seeing what's coming next. But in the case of VR, I think it will remain relatively niche. Normal people are already scared of how much power their screens have over their daily lives. If you're going to get them to enter a metaverse of some kind or another, you're going to have to trick them. That's why the metaverse I choose to smugly predict is on its way is one based on augmented reality. The metaverse won't be a digital world that you can escape into. It'll be a digital layer that none of us can escape from. As QR codes plaster the planet and our social lives are mediated by technology, the groundwork is already being laid. Pokemon Go already proved that augmented reality could turn the normies into an army of stampeding zombies competing for the ownership of a digital asset in the form of a Zubat. Apple and Google are already hard at work on their own AR goggles. Some might even be released this year. And Meta are mapping the world with live maps. Whether we view it through our phones or a pair of newfangled goggles or a non-invasive brain chip, one day I think the internet will sort of infect the physical world. And they'll sell it to us as an escape from the screen. View a new world with new eyes that we'll sell to you. That's the future I reckon might be round the corner. So if you don't mind, I'm going to forget about all that and go play some Tetris. Oh, and if you could like, share and comment, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, that'd be swell. I can go this way.
Tetris.